G'day, I'm Bruce, and today we're going to try and get this old fire truck engine running on the pump at the back, which has been sitting for many years. This truck is fitted with what I think is a 1200cc VW engine, which has been traditionally used as an off-road firefighter. This was originally a state government asset, and by the hour meter it's only done 86 hours. The old Bedford's fitted with a 300 cubic inch motor, and it appears that this engine and the truck engine were fed out of the same fuel tank, and the fuel was just absolutely rotten, so we're probably going to have to clean the carburetor out on this engine to get it to run, which is we don't know how hard it's going to be to clean the carburetor out because the fuel was really bad. With this engine, we suspect it hasn't been started for at least 20 years or more. What they did with any of these rural fire trucks, of course they're filled up with fuel all the time on standby, ready to zoom out and fight the fires, so that might be why the fuel is so stale. At the moment the truck is running on an outboard fuel tank, and what we might do, we might set up a separate tank to see if we can get this engine to run. In Australia, the way these off-road fire trucks were set up, if they wanted to, they could either pump out of the main tank. If they were out in the bush somewhere, if they ran out of water, they had to know where any creeks or water holes were. Then they'd race over to the water hole and they'd just chuck that pipe and strainer in the water, and then they'd just swing a few taps around, and that way it wouldn't be sucking out of the main tank, it'd be sucking out of a water hole, quickly fill the fire truck up again and back off to fight the fire again. The way they're set up, they have 4 hoses on board, 2 either side, with quick couplers, and they can quickly join these together if they need to, if they can't get close to the water hole. So you can see they have 2 on this side and 2 on that side. Obviously where we are here now, you could probably get away with only having one hose. So that was the way the setup was that way. If they couldn't get right up the water hole, they just took 4 hoses together and either plug them on here or plug them on down the bottom. I'd say they'd probably plug them on here, and that just goes straight into the suction side of the pump. We brought the old fire truck down here so we can back up to the water hole just to have a bit of a look at how many pieces of hose or whatever we need. If there's any other stuff we might need, well, we can go into town and buy any other stuff before we really get fair income. There's the hour meter. As you can see, it's only done 86 hours on the clock. It has a couple of gauges, has a few gauges on the back of the engine there on a little panel. And it looks like 2 of them might be pressure gauges and the other one might be a tachometer. It looks like it's got a rust hole here in the manifold, but apart from that, everything else on the engine looks like it's complete. As you can see, we're looking down on the top of the engine here, and you can see the battery looks really old. You can tell by those old batteries too, when you see the ends of the battery starting to bulge, you know they're really old. Everything's expanding inside. You can just imagine the bush fire brigade out in the bush. They would have been in a hurry. They would have had blokes with them, would have ripped the back doors open, pulled those pipes out, laid them all out, quick couplers, couple them all together, got the strainer, chucked the strainer in a water hole like this, turned the key, hit that motor up, and away they would have been, pumping that tank full, ready to race off and fight the fire again. The way they work this setup is they don't actually have a foot valve as such. When you pull this here off and you look inside, this is only really a strainer where you can see straight through it, whereas the foot valve has a flap in there so the water can't go back. And the idea with the cage is they just throw that in the water. This part can't be laying on the sand or the mud. They got the guard around the outside, so that should ensure that it's going to suck clean water. I'm just going to pull this other hose out if I can reach it, if I can get a grip on it. Nice and mouldy, that's why I've got the gloves on. And as you can see, that pipe would hook up to that pipe. So by the time they added 4 of those together, that would work pretty good. They'd be able to get a bit of a distance away from the water hole. And in our area, down around the coast and places like that, they used to have signs up with WP. They'd just be out in the middle of nowhere, there'd be a sign, WP. Water point is what the WP stood for. We'll leave this here now and we'll head back up to the shed, have a look around, see if there's anything else we need to get this thing going. If there is, we'll head to town and buy it before the shop shut. We're back in the shed now and some wasps have appeared. The cameraman was the first victim. You can see on his hand there where he got bitten, and his hand was actually closing as he got bitten. He's undoing one of these caps here, so we don't know. He must have been closing his hand and somehow the wasp came out, bang, got him. My father always reckoned snakes and wasps could move quicker on a hot day, and with wasps they can smell your sweat and they get after you. Turning out to be a really hot day again here today, and maybe that's why they got the cameraman, they could smell his sweat. One thing about this type of work we're doing on this channel, it's not the sort of work for everybody where you're walking around in long grass up to your waist wondering whether you're going to stand on a brown snake or not. Maybe that's been the fuel tank for the engine maybe. Goes back here under that box. First thing I think we'll do, we'll undo the battery leads and put another battery in. Someone's put a bit of grease on that in the past, which is good. I thought it might have had those old quarter Whitworth bolts, but it hasn't, which is good, because nothing else will fit quarter Whitworth except quarter Whitworth. I'm just going to try and undo this clamp on here. I don't know whether it'll come undone or not, but I'll give it a go. This is actually a pressure pipe coming from the pump, I think. Yep, I'll just work it a bit, otherwise the clamp will fall apart. I guess that'd give them an idea what pressure the pump was putting out. It's hard to see there. I'm just going to take my eye protection off so I can see a bit better. Right, now I'll be able to get at that wing nut. I'll try and get a bit on both sides. I'm surprised at that. Normally they can just snap very easily. Yep, working backwards and forwards is probably the best procedure. I'm surprised at that. The previous mechanic must have put a bit of grease on there, I reckon, or a bit of anti-seize. So whoever the previous mechanic was, thank you very much. Look at that, it's going to come undone. We think our new battery is going to be taller than this one. They're nearly rusted solid. I'll just take that right off and this one here right off. There's our wing nut, got him back. Right, the old battery should come out. He's stuck. It is a really old battery. We just got to hope our new battery, which is slightly longer, will fit. I think I'll just go and grab a brush, a small artist brush. There's the battery holder cleaned up. We've just got to try our new battery now and see if it will fit. This battery's that old, you can nearly feel it crunching in your hands when you pick it up. That's pretty lucky. It looks like it will fit. These things are very handy. You can buy them from any battery place or anywhere that sells automotive parts. Just a battery brush. It's got this end on here. You can put that on there, and I find it's always better if you always turn it the same direction. Otherwise all the bristles get bent up if you try and go both ways. The idea is you just shove that on there and turn it, and that'll clean it up real easily. And then to do the inner, just go like that. There's the inner. Inside, just get your inner. Same thing I find, it's best if you always turn it one way. Otherwise all the bristles will be bent up every which way if you try and go both ways. Yeah, very handy gadget. They're not that dear to buy. This one here is broken, I see. It may not be any good. If it's broken through there. I think it was broken all the time, but I don't know. That's the one we want. I'll just check that it is the positive. Sure is. Will that come undone? I'll just sit it back on there for the time being. It's going to take some getting undone. Tighten up a little bit. No way. I'm just going to use this gas heater to heat up this wing nut here, and then I'm going to spray it. But a word of warning, around any of these batteries or carburetors, anything to do with fuel or batteries, danger. Because could be hydrogen coming off that, could be petrol fumes coming off the carburetor which could have just flooded or something. We don't know. So I'm going to pull that battery right out the way so it can't explode. And you should always make sure you are in a very well ventilated area. Heat rises, so I'll keep that at the highest point. Go a bit tighter. Right. We'll get this piece of little hammer. Give it a bit of shock treatment. Spray. When we're doing this, we really want to heat on this side because the heat's going to go up. If I turned it around the other way and heat it like that, the heat's probably going to go up and could possibly melt the solder in those and burn all the wiring, so we don't want that. So we want it to go this way. Try and tap it backwards and forwards a bit. Right, we finally got him. All these things, if you really want to do them properly, they're all a patience game. Righto, they'll be warm for a while. Finally got rid of him. Looking pretty good. Righto, we can put the battery back in now. Right, it looks pretty rusty looking, doesn't it? That looks pretty good. Now our negative wire is here. It probably doesn't matter if it touches that, but I might be able to move that around a little bit. It looks a bit better. Most times with batteries, if you take notice, it's nearly always the positive end that corrodes first or corrodes at all. It's just the way batteries are. I've just got to be careful now that I don't short that out, because this is the positive end. And that must be about a 12 mil. I thought it was a 13, but it is a 12. Before we try and short across the back of the starter motor and see if it'll turn, we'll pull the spark plugs out and I'll put some oil down the plug holes. That way if it does turn, sometimes if the piston's at the bottom of the stroke and you go to crank and there's rust on the bore, then it can actually seize up by the time the piston gets to the top. And then if you try and turn the motor in reverse and you hook onto the front of the crankshaft where it's got the nut holding the bolt or whatever it is, bolt holding the front pulley on, or the harmonic balancer, then you're in big trouble then, because when you try and reverse it to try and get the piston to come down away from the rust, then all that happens, you undo the bolt. The bolt comes undone, which is holding the front pulley on, or the harmonic balancer. So if you put a bit of oil down the plug holes, maybe a bit of CRC, a bit of spray, WD-40, anything like that, that gives it some chance of being able to push up and push past the rust and keep turning rather than seize up. There we are. Short reach plugs. Aren't these nice and quiet compared with the air operated ones I've had for about 40 years? Righto, we're going to do the other side now. This side's a bit more awkward. Quite awkward to get to that one. Oh well, came off fairly easily. got the straw on the end of the WD-40. And if I can find the plug hole, there we are. I've got the oil can. Righto, a bit of oil. I'll put those plugs back in now on this side. Hope that stays in there. Next plug. This one will be harder. Not too tight, but not too loose. Get those plug wires on. That side's done. This is sort of like having an each-way bet. Some people would say WD-40 might be better because it's thinner, might penetrate a bit more around the side of the pistons, around the rings. Other people would say, no, they would say good old engine oil is probably better. So I'll have an each-way bet. I'll use a bit of both. There we are, now I've got it. I'll turn that around a bit. If it sprays, if it atomises a bit better than the oil can, it may get on the top side of the piston more. There we are. If I turn that every which way, hope the straw doesn't drop off and go down its neck. Because the spray will actually probably spray better. There we are. Do it the easy way. Where are we? Here we are. We've got another very hot day here in southeast Queensland. Getting hotter by the minute. When it comes to putting plugs back in engines like this, it's probably a little bit easier if you have a universal swivel joint, ball joint, whatever you want to call it. I feel that just makes it a bit easier, and the thing will sort of find, it'll sort of find the hole itself. If you've got a solid bar on here, there's probably more chance of getting cross-threaded, but that's only my idea. There we are. It's always a good idea too to start, screw them in by hand rather than just put an impact gun on or a brace or something that you can just go zip and then you'll cross thread them. Whereas if you can screw them up by hand, 99% of the way by hand, you'll never cross thread a plug. Now the next argument is going to be, is it best to crank with the plugs in or out after you put oil down on top of the pistons? I feel it's better with the spark plugs in because then you're forcing oil or WD-40, you're forcing that down around the rings because you're under compression when you're cranking. Other people will say, what have you done? You are just going to oil the plugs. When you come to get the motor going, you could have the plugs oiled up and they may not fire. So you can see there's for and against. There's always going to be an argument either way, which is best. Right, they're on there. I'm just going to check the oil. We better make sure it's got oil in it, otherwise that'd be pretty bad. Yeah, we have got oil. Doesn't look too bad either. It's got oil in it, it's full. It's got a bit of oil on top of the pistons. I'm just going to short the starter motor out and see if it will turn, see if it will come to life. That's a good sign. Looks like it's going to turn. It sounds pretty healthy. It's always good when cranking if every cylinder sounds about the same on the starter motor as it's cranking. If they go wow, 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 that one that's going wow, that one's down on compression. A lot of motors you can pick that straight away, whether it be diesel motors or petrol motors. Sometimes it can be a stuck valve, sometimes it can be a bit of rust on the seat if they've been sitting for years. When you start them up and run them, after a while they can improve, they can get back right again. It's probably always a good idea in a case like that to set the tappets after they've been running for a while. If you set the tappets and you've got rust on the seat in the head, the valve seat in the head, or on the valve itself, you can imagine as you run it, if you've already set the tappets and you've closed the gap down to the recommended gap, as it wears the rust off the seat on the valve and the seat in the head, that valve will ride then. So it's always best to run it first, even if it has tick, 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 even if it has a rattly tappet. Don't worry about that. Get her running, run for probably half an hour even, until you've got that sound where it sounds like this, where they all sound even. There may be one there that is slightly weaker than the other three. One cylinder may be slightly weaker, but it's good. It should be easily good enough to run. Righto, a bit of spray on them. I'm just going to try and pull this air cleaner pipe off. The clamps here are very rusty, but I'll have a go. I don't want to go breaking the hose. I'll only be making more work for myself. Yeah, looks like it's going to come apart. It's got a loose spot about there, so. Yep, that's good. Looks pretty clean inside. Whenever I go to start one of these pumps, I always make sure there's water in the housing, otherwise the seal will run dry and I'll probably wreck the seal in no time. So it's always a good idea. The water lubricates the seal, that's the whole idea, so I'll put some water in. Well, the water's gone somewhere. Righto, the next move is going to be rig up the fuel line straight onto the carburetor. That way we know it's going to get clean fuel. That's not going to work because that line's too big. Seem to be opening far enough. Oh, well, all we can do is give it a crank. and a bit of choke and see what happens. These books came with this truck. These here are all to do with that engine, all to do with the pump and the engine. It looks like it was supplied by Annan and Thompson Proprietary Limited, who I think are in Brisbane. VW Industrial Engine Type 122, Type 126A. So we've got that book, got this book here, which has been a photocopy, I'd say. Look at that, I opened it up right on the page of the carburettor. How lucky was that? I'll leave that open at that because we might have to pull it apart yet. I'll be very surprised if the jets aren't all clogged up from old fuel. Here's our last book. This one is to do with the fire pump. I guess it tells you all about the pump. Looks like quite a detailed book. A bit more about the engine. There's an exploded view of the pump. I don't know whether you'll be able to see that or not, but looks like there's a lot of parts in that pump. I've had a better look at this dashboard they've got made up here, and all the wiring there looks pretty old and everything seems pretty dead there, so I think I'll run a wire straight from the positive on the battery straight to the coil, and then I think I'll just short the starter motor, and that would probably be the quickest way to go, I'd reckon. If I can get to the coil. I'm ready to go. I've got the choke in one hand and the start screwdriver in the other. Well, it fired. More choke. Thinking about doing something. I don't know whether it's got points or not, but if it has, the points could be dirty. I'll give another shot of this aero start. It looks like the starter was engaged then, because this wire, all of a sudden this wire had power coming down it and decided it was just going to keep cranking, so once I pulled that wire off it went dead. So yeah, there's a little bit of power there now. There's a green light on there now, that wasn't on there before, so something's starting to wake up. Give it another try. Bit more choke. I'll just squeeze the bulb up a bit now and see if that makes any difference. That's something. Pretty hot here today. The wasps are starting to circulate a bit now, so we might have to do a run for it soon if they decide they're going to chase us. A bit of smoke went their way, so that'll probably stir them up a bit. I'll swap some of the fuel lines around, and I've got it rigged up now, so I'm going back through its original manual fuel pump rather than just have the bulb on the outboard tank. I thought it might have been good enough to gravity feed the carburettor because the tank's up higher, but in reality I don't think it is. I think I've got to go through the old manual fuel pump to have a bit more fuel pressure. I'll just put my hand over the top. We're going to have another go. I had the fuel pump rigged up wrong, so I had the suction side on the pressure side on the suction, so it will never work like that. When the fuel pump and everything's right, you can always force air or fuel straight through a manual fuel pump and out the other side. When the valves are right, you cannot blow back through a manual fuel pump. You're opposing both the valves. One way you're going with the valves, the proper way, the other way you're going against both the valves. So now, we're going to try it now, give it another go. Where are we there? Well, the main jet must be totally blocked. As you can see, I'm hand choking the thing, holding the throttle wide open. It will run, but it just needs that carburetor pulling apart. Somewhere there's a main jet in there and it must be totally blocked. Well, it's not really the video I was hoping to make. I thought we'd be spraying water somewhere at the moment, but you can only do what you can do, and it's such a hot day and it's quite sweaty, and I've been working on it for a few hours now, so I think I might go and have a cold drink and something to eat. But before I go, I'd just like to give a shout out to Steve's place down under, who I was talking to the other night on the phone, and I've watched his videos a fair bit. He's got tons and tons of equipment, whether it be tractors or trucks. So I reckon he's got enough stuff there that he could work on all that for a lifetime. He's doing similar stuff to what I'm doing, but not the same. So if you'd like to watch his channel, it's Steve's Place Down Under. Have a look at it, see what you think. You might be pretty impressed by it too. Maybe late this afternoon or tonight, I might be a bit more energetic and I might come out and whip that carburetor off her and pull her apart and see what's inside waiting for me. If I can get it back together without breaking all the gaskets and whatever is involved in pulling it apart, we might be able to put it back on there. If we can get the thing running properly, we might be able to go back down the creek, throw the hose in the water and see what happens. That'll be about it for this video now. So until next time, thanks very much for watching.